And we're live. Hey guys, welcome back to Critical African Thinkers. As you know, this is a place where we examine everything under the microscope of logic to ascertain what is most factual and logically consistent. So today we're back again with Tade Sweya. Last time we had a conversation on reparations. We're talking about reparations for all. But somehow the conversation got derailed and we were not able to get to Tade's thought process or his point. So I decided to bring him back. So today it will be just him talking. I need him to lay out this idea that he has. He thinks that reparations should be for all Americans, not just specifically for African Americans or people who were descended from slaves. So I want to understand where he's coming from. I want to understand his points. I want to see the visibility of what he's saying and, push back if need be and ask questions if I have to for clarifications and all that. So today is always very fun to talk with, and I believe that this would be worth all our time. So today, how you doing? Welcome back.
Doing good, man. Yeah. So I guess we can just get get started. So you understand the basic idea, right?
Well, you have to explain it.
Okay,
so
the
even
basic
if I
idea
understand it,
is it's not so much inheritance, but it's not so much of reparations. That's what it will work as. But what it is it's a redistribution of the inheritance across all people.
whose inheritance are you
Everyone that
redistributing?
dies.
Okay, so if someone dies,
Yeah.
their wealth gets to be
So
redistributed
this already
to.
happens in the U.S. So this is a really interesting point that I like to tell people who don't understand the economics here. So you may have heard of Sweden, Norway, Finland. This isn't true, but so Sweden, Norway, and Denmark are sometimes thought of as like socialist, like amazing paradises, right? Where everything is much more fair. But what's interesting is if you have like very like if your parents have a lot of money in Sweden or Norway, when they die, it all goes to the kids, 100%. Whereas in the U.S., we tax it. So this is a tax against the rich because it's so in a practical way,
Inheritance tax.
They can't really tax it, right? Because it's not that much money. It's too hard to find. It costs money just to put you in the ground and everything, right? So you can't tax the poor obviously when they die. But also the way it works is there's always a cap, and that cap has changed a lot. I think right now the latest numbers, I could be wrong. I think it's like 10 million. In 2009, there was a holiday. There was no tax. No, I'm sorry, that was 2010. It's changed. The cap in 2011 was like 3 million. So it's like each year it'll change. It goes up, obviously, right? Like somewhat, but not, like everything they do in Congress, like what is it? Like the minimum wage, the alternative minimum tax. They don't index these things to like.
So can you explain the cap that you're talking about? What's the cap?
So the cap is when it kicks in. So if you die tomorrow and you have $10,000 in the bank, the $10,000 isn't touched. But every dollar you have after 10 million right now, 10 years ago is every dollar you had after, say, 3 million. So it can change, each year. But right now it's every dollar you have after 10 million. The federal government takes 45% of that.
Wow. So if Elon Musk was to, not saying that it should happen, if Elon Musk were to die tomorrow, and so $10 million is guaranteed not going to be taxed. The rest of his wealth, if it amounts to $50 billion, they're going to be taxed, and 45% of that goes to the government.
Well, sort of, yes. I mean, obviously, it's a little bit complicated because where he has his money, and if he gives it to a charity, if he leaves it to a charity in his will, then it cannot go to the government. But 45% of what would have gone to his heirs is taken by the government. That's the idea, right? So you can leave you can put your like money in a place where they won't take it, but basically, if you want to give your kids 1 million and you leave them, well, okay, if you give them 10 million and then you have the $1 million right after that, 45% of that will be taken. So if you're trying to give it to your kids, let's say you have $110 million, you want to leave it all to your kids. The government will get 45 million. Your kids will get 55 million.
Mm.
And
So
so,
is this the
yeah,
reason behind why people like Bill Gates say they are going to leave their wealth to charities, that they're not going to give their wealth to their
yeah.
kids?
So
So,
it's part of why they act like they're being super generous, but it actually allows them to control their entire wealth, right? So it is sort of a
so the
trick.
children can be in charge of the charities. So,
Exactly, right? Yeah, you leave it to a foundation where your kid has it. There's a lot of corruption here, right? I mean, these are like the wealthiest people in the world. And if you read like Tom Sowell, he's like very like red pilled on taxes. He's like the like wealthy people will always find a way to not pay or to cheat. And it's somewhat true. But I mean, Bill Gates will give, say, 80% of his money, but his kids will still probably get a check for 100 million, and the government will take some of that money. But yes, by not giving it directly to your kids, you can shield it. And it's also a reason why, and I know this because I actually met a kid who's just really wealthy, and every year, like at Christmas, him and his older brother got a check, and it changed it. I think it was either $32,000 or $64,000 from each parent. And the reason they would get this check is because you're allowed to give to your kids. I don't. It's either the combined or the single number. But let's just say that's the amount. Say 32,000. You can give to or at least you could then in that year. It's probably gone up. But yeah, the point is you can give a set amount to your kids that's untaxed. So while you're alive, because obviously, let's say you have 100 million. Obviously, you can just say, "Well, I'm going to transfer half of that to my kid now while I'm alive." So you can't do that. You can do it. You can give your kid, say, let's say you want to give your kid $5 million right now. By law, when you do that, that should count $5 million to your cap. So then when you die, your cap should kick in at 5 million. So you should fill out that paperwork. For a transfer that big, they're probably going to know, and you probably will. Now, if you give your kids less than 32,000, you don't have to. Because some people that are really rich they're gonna give their kids the max every single year. It's just to sort of to dodge as much of that tax as they can. And of course, there's other creative ways to dodge it. For example, you can put money in an account for school, and that won't count. So that's free. You can, I'm sure there's probably ways to pay for like medical debt for your kids. There's all kinds of sort of ways to get around it. But the point is, like, if you're giving your kids direct cash each year, which would be the very easy way to dodge this tax. That's just when you get old, you start to just give all your money to your kids. You can't do that. Like, the system is somewhat robust to this. But also, my big point about when I say this is I don't care about the fact that people will dodge any tax somewhat. I care about what the data says. The data says that as income tax goes up, tax receipts go up, but not as much as they should, which is to be expected, right? If you double the tax rate, people find creative ways to pay not as much as they should. Right? So the more you tax people, the more they're like motivated to not pay taxes. Conservatives love to make this argument, so like we shouldn't have taxes because it doesn't work, and it's true. Like, they're right, but it's obviously not. It's not a totally honest argument, because yes, if we raise taxes and we assume we're going to get every dollar of that, we're wrong. But if we assume that we're not going to get anything, that's also wrong. If you analyze taxes, the income tax, people dodge that a lot more than the tax at death, and some of it makes sense. It's just like, how do you dodge that? And so we have a bunch of data. So in 1973, the estate tax peaked at, I think it was, I want to say it was over 80%. So at that point, the cap was like, say, it was like, it was around like maybe 1 million back then, which is not that different then. It's like the equivalent of like 6 million today. So there was a $1 million cap, and then it was 80% of every dollar after that was taxed. And the tax receipts weren't that different. So you can get into like the detailed, like, you can get really down to like the details, but the bottom line is people dodge this tax less than they dodge other taxes. And we have data when
Okay.
the tax goes up, we still collected a bunch of taxes. When the tax goes down, we still collect some taxes. It's not as dependent on like cheating, or if you're more like cynical, you could say people will always cheat. They cheat somewhat, but that's sort of a fixed amount. It's
Mm.
not likely that if we increase the tax that they'll cheat more. And important to my argument is if we increase the tax and everybody knows that the money that you cheat on your taxes the is what would go directly to poor people, I think people will be less likely to cheat. Because right now, a lot of people who cheat on their taxes are gonna think, okay, like, yeah, I can give this like money to my kids. I can, hide it and give it to my kids, or I can pay it as a tax as I should, and the
Okay.
government will use it
So
to fund a war. And then because they can think that in their head, they're like, by not paying taxes, I'm not paying for war, so I don't feel bad. But if you
so
know
so
that this money
in
you're
your
taking it away from the other kids, I think it's actually less likely that you'll cheat. That's my argument.
your in your argument, right?
Yeah.
You want to take that 45%, right, that
No,
you
no, I
take
want to take
from
100%. 100%.
100% of the estate tax. So if someone dies,
With
the
no cap.
government gets the
100%.
government gets to take 100% of their wealth and
That's
redistribute
my
it.
goal. That's my goal. That's not what's going to
That's
happen.
insane.
No, it's great. Why?
It's insane because you can't take people. Okay, part of the reason why people work so hard, why they amass so much wealth, is so they can leave something for their kids and the generation after and after and after, right?
Yeah, but you can
You
still leave
can't
your
take
kids
away.
a ton of stuff while you're alive.
Yeah, but you know, I don't think it's. I think it de incentivizes people, or people are still going to look for creative ways, right? Because
And people will look for ways around
they're
it, but the
probably
people
they
look for ways
they're,
around
they're
every tax.
probably going to maximize giving their wealth to their kids while they're alive,
They already do.
such
They already
that
do.
such
Yeah.
that what is left, if you're going to take 100% of what is left, it's going to be very meager, right?
No, no,
So,
no. The data says that's not true. And people, so especially if people
but what's the
know,
rationale for you wanting to take 100% of the estate tax, and how are you going to administer that money
well, that's my goal. I
to?
don't think that's going to happen. So wait, my point is that if you look at the average inheritance, the data isn't
Mm.
clear. My totally honest answer is the numbers between 100,000 and 1 million. It's probably the best data I've looked at, says, because people also hide this. They don't want people to know how much they're inheriting, of course, right?
Mm.
The best estimate I got was somewhere close to around 500,000. So let's just say 500,000. So, and that is even with the estate tax. So that's even though the government takes almost half of all the people who have a lot of money, the average amount that everybody gets from the previous generation is 500,000. So for people who are into
So
math,
so
that's the mean.
500,000
That's the mean.
is what 500,000 is what someone gets to get from their parents' wealth,
Well, okay.
however
Yeah,
rich.
obviously, wait. So it obviously depends on the year. This is an estimate, but it's over 500,000. That's a low estimate when you use the baby boomers giving to Gen X. So currently, the current generation, that's the oldest generation in the country that will like die off in the next, say, like 30 years. So in like the present time, inheritance is there's a good estimate that that on average inheritance is over 500,000. I don't think that's off. Now depends on who you ask. It could be a lot more. It could be over 1 million. But let's just say 500,000 to be somewhat
Mm.
conservative. So that's the average. Of
Mm.
course, what does that mean? Does that mean that that's what the average person gets? Right. So this is math again, right? So that's the average inheritance or the mean, but what's the median inheritance? Do you know? And what's the mode of the inheritances?
Now I'm bad at math, so I don't know.
Do you understand the concept between the mean, the median, and the mode?
Yeah, I do. I do. I can make those
Okay,
distinctions and
the mode is
differentiations.
easy, right? What do you think is the mode? What's the most common number of inheritance in the country?
You said 500,000.
No, it's zero.
Okay.
The
Oh,
most
zero.
common. So if you take all the
Oh,
people
oh.
in this generation
Mm.
who are going to get an inheritance in the next like
Mm.
like 20 years, the
Yeah.
most
So
common amount
most
people
of
get
them will
is
be
zero.
zero. Yeah, most people will not be getting
No,
anything.
it's not most. It's not most. It's less than half will get zero, but a lot of people will get like 500, right? It's actually hard to get zero because if your parents die with a shirt on their back, that's yours, right? So, but yeah, almost zero is the most common amount that people will get, effectively zero,
Mm.
right? But
Okay.
a very small amount, right? That's most common. The median number, every estimate that I've looked at, the best I can say, around 30,000. So half of the people will get less than 30,000. Half of the people will get more than 30,000. But the average is 500,000. So
Mm.
that's not a normal distribution, right? That's a really crazy distribution, right? Which means that,
So I think the median will be would make will give a better reality of how much people are getting.
yeah. I mean, well, no, the mean, I mean, they're both numbers. The mean in statistics is called the expectation, which I guess you could
Yeah,
say
but
is a
that's just
little
the average of
misleading.
that. The mean is just the average of everything.
But the mean, so the mean is the amount that you could give to everybody. If you take it all and you redistribute
Yeah,
it equally, that's
yeah.
what you'll get, right? So that's
Yes,
the amount.
yes.
So that's an
That's like
important number
flat
because
flat average.
now the median could be more than that, depending on the distribution. So if the
Mm.
median, if it's weirdly skewed, the median could be like 1 million. And so that's misleading if you think, oh, well, we can give everyone that. Well, you can't. In this case, we can give everyone a lot more than that. But is
So
it worth, right?
my question would be, let's say somehow you were able to magically enforce this policy of taking 100% of the estate tax, right, when people die. How are you going to be able to redistribute this wealth? What is the mechanism for redistributing it to the people that need it? And how am I very sure? How am I not sure? What's the guarantee that government is not going to use this money for whatever it feels like, and they're not
Yeah, I
going
mean,
to? What's the guarantee they're
it
going to
takes a
use it
level of trust.
for the people that
Well, I
actually
mean,
need it?
yeah, I guess you can never trust the government completely, and if they siphon off some percentage, you probably wouldn't know. But I think economically, the analysis to find if they're using a great deal of like that money is pretty simple, right? Because we know when people die. I mean, the thing about this tax that makes it so good is like we know when people die. It's the simplest time to
So,
redistribute
so
wealth is on death because like you only die once,
No,
right?
so
Like
my question be, how do you redistribute this wealth? What's the
okay,
criteria
yeah.
for giving it to
So
people,
I
right?
think yeah. So
Okay, let me give an example. For example, someone dies in maybe Oregon, right? Is the wealth going to be redistributed
no,
within
no, no.
Oregon itself, people who are poor within that state?
No, no, it has nothing to do. It has nothing
What's
to
the
do with.
radius of
It
distribution?
has nothing to
What's
do
the
with being
mode
poor.
of distribution?
It has nothing to do being poor. My original idea. So okay, so I'll backtrack a little bit. There's a charity. The only charity that I give to is called Give Direct. And I'll admit part of it is ideal. I think like ideologically I have a bias towards giving directly to people. I think if you want to give somebody something, you should give it to them and they should have control and they should choose. But there's also a lot of data. So there's a study, it's in Kenya. So they usually go somewhere in Africa. The reason they do that is because things there are more cheap. So they can give people more money for less, essentially, right? So they'll give everyone in Kenya 5,000 and they'll come back in 3 years. Not everyone in the like whole country, but they'll choose like a town.
Mm.
Give everyone in the town 5,000. They come back in 2 years. They look at what happened, right? And so what's kind of cool about this is you can kind of see how much money doesn't help people. You can see that yeah, if you give them a tiny amount of money, it probably doesn't really help, right? So if you give everyone $500, they're happy, but like in 2 years, is their life any different? No, right? And you can kind of, and of course, $500 there is not the same as here, but you can see, if you can read each time they do this, they have a value. They say like, how well did it work? And it might be that for $3,000, the people can really change their lives. Like they'll do think the classic example that they give is like they give people a bunch of money, and what people would do is they'd buy a roof. They'd buy a metal roof because a metal roof is like $500, but it lasts like 30 years. Whereas a grass roof is like 100, but it only lasts 1 year. So people that would buy a grass roof like every year can now, have the capital like investment buy like a metal roof. Now they can save more of like their money and they're just like way better off. And things that like sort of the like philosophy is that the person from the West who wants to help doesn't know exactly what people need as well as people know, right? Which I think is true. Like generally, that's sort of a bias. I think that's overall people are too confident that they know what someone else needs, right? I think that is true. And
But isn't that part of the um, argument against welfare that when you give people free stuff, they become dependent on it, they become lazy,
yeah, but
they don't want to
that's the
work,
point.
they
That's the
they,
point,
they
right?
don't.
Yes, 100%. That's true. And that's what they've shown is that if you give somebody, if you come in one time in Kenya to a village and everyone gets 2 grand, of course, some people are going to just waste it. That's always true. Nothing is
Mhm.
perfect. But if you give them all $2,000, you come back in a year, their lives are better. Whereas if instead you give them the same amount of money, but you give it to them every month over 2 years, it doesn't work as well.
Mm. Okay,
So it
so the
is true.
distinction is that this one is a lump sum where they can decide to do something really big with it and it will change their life. While the other case of welfare, it's a sum that's staggered over time that people can, just use because they know something is coming next month and
I mean,
something is
there's
coming the month after.
a lot of studies on this. Another thing that they show is that people who aren't home do really bad with the money. So, like a refugee. So, if you go to like a refugee camp in Africa, if you basically go somewhere where people live, but they're not from that land, you give them money, they
Mm,
don't use that money as well. So, there's something to do with people who have sort of been living in the same place for a while and they're poor. You give them money, they become not poor. People who are in a place that they haven't lived for that long don't do as well.
mm,
So there's more than one variable, but it's definitely true that lump sums will, of course, the scary thing about a lump sum is they can blow it all at once, but in aggregate, the lump sum will be used effectively by way more people.
mm,
Right. Of course, yes. Some people will immediately waste that money, and then you feel like, well, what do? I wish I had given you a smaller amount. But in aggregate, and that's what's kind of cool about this work is they give the money and then they leave and then they come back. So they're not there to watch them. They're not making them take a drug test or something like this, right? It's just purely money.
mm.
Purely, you guys all get money and you can do whatever you want, and then like we come back and what's also very funny about like to me it's like really funny when they ask people what did you do,
Mm,
some people do waste the money, but when they ask people what did your friends do, your neighbors do, they get a
mm,
lot worse answers. So people have it in their head that like other people like waste money, but in general people use money for either things they need or for things to make their life better, which is good.
okay, so I want to transfer to my phone now, so you can keep talking. I really want to know how you intend to distribute this money that you're taking. So
Yeah.
maybe you can answer that.
Okay, yeah. So obviously, people talk about giving people money, and there's not a lot of examples of giving people a lump sum. Like the example that you talk about, where you give them something each month. Obviously, I think it's not the same thing. The So people who are against this idea bring up the fact that if you win the so if you win a bunch of money in a contest like a state lottery or you're a pro athlete or something like this, the claim is that these people um, they lose all their money. And importantly, the data on this doesn't really exist. This is made up. There's a made up claim that X percentage of people who win the lottery will be broken in 3 years. It's not true. We don't actually know what the. I'm sorry. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, good. Do I need to start over, or am I good?
Yeah, yeah, I can hear you. You're good.
Okay, good. Well, yeah. So the claim is that people will blow all like the money. I think this claim, A, that there's no source for it. The evidence is weak. B, if you win the lottery, you probably play the lottery a lot.
No, no,
Is
my
there?
question is how do you intend to distribute this wealth
I'm
that
having
you've
trouble hearing you.
taken?
You just got really quiet.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, but there's an echo now too.
An echo, an echo, an echo. Why is it an echo? Um, okay, let me go back out and try to come back in, or you can keep talking. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, that's a lot better.
All right, good.
Still think there. Oh no, it's gone now. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
So, yeah. So getting to this. I'm gonna get there. Just give me 1 second. So the
mm,
claim is that like they'll blow all the money because that's what people do. I think those like that argument to me is BS because the people who play these games are addicted to like gambling. So they're not the average person. Someone who plays the like lottery all the time and wins, obviously they aren't as rational with their money. Also, we don't know if it's true. Also, more importantly, so what, right? So I think it's a very weak claim. But of course, if we're going to do this, we want to give it to people the best way possible. And I think we know that we know somewhat what's the best time, and the best time would be to simulate an inheritance. So the best time to give you money would probably be when your parents die. Now maybe that's a little bit morose. Maybe that's going to have people like killing their parents. So maybe we don't want that. So maybe we're going to give it to you at the average age when your parents would die, right? So maybe we find that the average person like loses their parents, I don't know, at age like 45 or 55. So you get a big check at that time. Maybe you get two, one from each parent, two like simulated, like, and of course we sort of we can't give it all to people all at the same time because people aren't all dead. So it's going to have to be sort of as people die. So the natural time to give it is the age when your parents would die. I don't think we necessarily have to wait for them to die.
so this is the part where you give to the kids of the people who you are taking from. I'm talking about how do you give to other people, right?
No, no,
How
no.
do you?
When you die, your money is taken by the government.
Mhm.
Or say, like, let's say, okay, let's have your parents died. Your dad died, that money was taken. Your mom died, that money was taken. My parents died, that money was taken. All our parents have died now. Now, let's say they all died when we were young. Now you hit age 55. From that pool, you get a check. Everybody at age 55 gets a check from that pool. Everybody gets money from the pool.
So everybody at a certain age
Yes,
gets
at a
money
certain
from
age.
that pool.
Yes.
So that money you're getting from that pool, everybody at age 45, it means that the next year it's only people who are 45 years old that
Yes.
gets to get the
Of
money.
course. Of course.
So
Yeah. So
once
you
you've
only get it once.
gotten the money, you only get it once. Once you've gotten the money, you're settled, right? And then the next 45.
Yeah.
So what about people who never get to be 45? Why 45? What's the
Yeah.
what
Well, I'm open to a different age. I think you can make a lot of arguments. I just think that empirically, you want to figure out what's the most efficient way to use the money.
mm,
You can't give it to people when they're too young because if the program works by taking money when people are dying, then the average age where you have to give it is the average age when your parents die. So, from a practical perspective, if you're not going to create any new money, it has to work. It grows. The pool of money grows as people die. So we have to sort of give it as like we can we have to give the we can't if we start this like tomorrow we can't give all people money, right? We have to choose some age,
mm,
right? So there's a practical concern, but then there's also the concern that maybe 20-year-olds aren't as good at stewardship with money. And I think there's some evidence for this, right? So it's like I said, I know I sound like a hypocrite a little bit because I said when you give money, you should give it to them and just be hands off. And now I'm saying, well, you should give it to them when they're 45 instead of like 25 because they're going to spend. It's okay, fine. I am a little bit, you can call me like slightly paternalistic in the fact that I think we should think about the age you're at. But I'm still saying we should give it to you and it's yours. We shouldn't like monitor people. That's too paternalistic. But I think it is fair to say, okay, if we're going to redistribute, if we're going to do this, what is the like optimal age? And we have some data because we have inheritance now is spent pretty well in this country. What do people like spend it on? They pay off their house, they pay for their kids. So giving it to people who have kids who sort of are at that age where maybe they can buy a home or like they're in debt, right? So there's sort of giving a bunch of money to someone when they're 15 probably is not going to help them as much as giving it to somebody when they're a little bit older, right? And then practically you do need people to die to grow the pool. So that also makes sense for that reason. So I
So,
think, yeah, you choose an
so,
age, you give everyone a check at that age.
so does this mean that does it okay now? So another problem you might run into, right? What are if you want to do today? What's the population of U.S. citizens who
Agreed.
are 45 years old, right? Because part of the drawbacks you saw with reparations for African Americans was that they just to like 40 million people. It's not possible to just give 40 million people money, right? That's the cost to be too humongous. But now you intend to give every 45-year-old every year a
Yeah.
certain amount of money.
Yeah.
Did you take into consideration how many 45-year-olds there are
No.
compared to the amounts that you're taking from people who have died to redistribute to that those 45-year-olds? Have you taken into consideration that maybe the cost will be too much, or maybe the money will not even be sufficient enough
Yeah, of course, of
to?
course. So right now is a little bit unfair. I chose right now because right now is the best time. Right now is the best time because the baby boomers are huge. There's a lot of baby boomers, and Gen X is small. So right now, the people in like their like early 50s is a smaller population than the people in their say like late 70s.
Mm.
So obviously right now, but that's okay with me, right? So if this program continues, and I don't think this is a one-time thing. So like the idea of giving a race a bunch of money has always been a one-time thing, right? That's what people say, like, how much are the slaves or the descendants of the slaves owed? You give them that. And then what? Right? Like, but this isn't that, right? So this is something that would continually happen. If the wealth like distribution is really even, then this program would do nothing, right? So if everyone's parents have the same amount of money, then why would you do this? It's the exact same thing, right? But right now, that's not the case. It's not the case at all, right? So right now, it would be 99% of people would inherit more. It's not 90, it's like 98.6, right? But
Mm.
98.6% of people would inherit more money under this program than they would inherit if the inheritance was not redistributed in an equal way.
So I just checked, right? I just
Yeah.
checked the population of 45-year-olds in America right now, and
Yeah.
it's exactly the same amount as Black people
No
in
way.
America.
Really?
Yeah, 40 about 40 million people are around 45 years old. So let me see, between 45 to 54. Yeah,
No,
between
that can't be, man. That's wrong. There are not 40 million 45-year-olds. There's no way.
45 between 45 to 54. There are
Oh yeah, but
40 million.
that's very different. I'm talking just age 45. So it's about
Yeah,
40.
but between 35 to 44, you have 43 million, right? So the number is really not that different.
No, but it's each year you have to give money to 4 million people each year.
Yeah, each year. So if between 35 to 44, you have 43 million people, right? And
Yes.
between 45 to 54, you have another 40 million people. That's 80 million people, right? Um, So if you wanted to pick each year, how many of those people would be 45 year olds?
Approximately like 10% because you did a 10-year period.
So 10% of that. So that would be
Around 4 million.
like 4 million people.
Yeah.
Okay. 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 Okay.
I
Okay.
mean, the numbers I looked at, this is a rough estimate, but right, just very simple. America has around 300 million people. People live for less than they live for less than 100 years, but let's just say it's 100 just to make the math really easy. So on average, in America, around 3 million people die each year. Now it's people. There's actually less than the amount that should die because people come to this country when they're kids, right? So like they immigrate, but like really approximate, really approximate. We're gonna say in America, 3 million people die every year. And then
Mm.
there's approximately 3 million people in the age group that's below them by around 25 years, it's like 30 years. Those people would be the inheritors. So these are roughly equal populations.
So
Obviously, they're not exactly equal. In some years, the inheritance pool could be smaller,
mm,
but
so
that's
how much do you intend to? do you intend to give each year depending on how much was able to be collected for that year, or do you intend to give a certain amount every year?
No, you can't give more than you collect. But I mean, you could try to, because you have sort of non-normal like events, you could do a lot of things. But I imagine you would do something where you try to have it be somewhat smooth, right? Like you don't try to have people like suffer because they had a really bad year. So you try to you try to
When you
like,
say really bad year, it means not enough people died.
well, not enough rich people died. Like for example, say that tomorrow, I don't know.
But this is commodification of death, right? Because people are literally going to be profiting off the death of rich people.
They already are. The estate tax is already based on rich people. People like
Yeah,
that already
there's more incentive because more people are going to be directly getting this benefit. So who knows? Maybe more rich people will be assassinated just so their
No,
wealth
people
can
will
be
support rich people
redistributed.
more. It'll make the billionaire class incredibly popular. Like you'll want Elon Musk to get as rich as possible. It's a good thing now. You'll cheer for him. He'd
Yeah,
be
that's because
like,
no. You think that people would want it? See, if I know I'm going to be 45-year-old tomorrow, next year, right?
yeah,
Elon Musk has this certain amount of billions, right? I need that money. I'm going to do
yes,
something
yes,
to
yes.
him.
Okay, yes. I was about to explain that. So yes, this is like a shock to the system. So I was going to say this. So imagine tomorrow Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates are on an airplane and it crashes. I think it would make sense to take that money and redistribute it over the next 20 years. I don't think you
Why?
would, because
Why?
because A, like you said, you want to avoid the incentive to kill them, right? That's one reason. But B, just because like the idea is that the inheritance is shared between the people, right? So we're competitive, we are a capital, and I don't think this is a left wing or a right wing idea. In fact, I think this is a free market, a capitalist idea. Like when you play, what's that game? What's the game called? What's the game that people play? Monopoly. When you play that game, you start with the same amount of money, right? So the idea is like
Mhm.
this is not like a socialist idea. This is just saying the game has to reset at some point, has to restart. And in this case, the game restarts at death, and the money that's made in the previous generation is sent to the next generation equally. That's all,
Mhm.
right? And so, of course, you want people in the next generation to share in the wealth that our parents made, like all of our parents. And so we don't want you to get a lot more than me because you turned 45 one year before me, right? Because it's not but of course we do want you to get a lot more than me if you turned 45 30 years before me and you are from a generation of people where the old people had all the money, right? Then yes, you need it because in that case there was a huge wealth, imbalance between the old and the young. So in that case, then yeah, the young should get more because the old people held more. So you want to make it smooth is my argument, right? We don't want to make it. We definitely, for example, don't want it to be per day, right? So like, just imagine that the worst case would be that it's everyone who died that day. So you are very lucky because you turned 45 the day that Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos got in a plane crash. So you get $1 billion. I turned 45 the next day, and I don't get hardly anything. Like that would be nonsense, right? So the idea
Mm.
is yes, how smooth do you need to make it? Obviously, one day is bad. Your argument about you're going to turn 45 next year, so you kill them. Okay, so probably 1 year is not smooth enough. So you smooth it
Mm.
out. Maybe it's 10 years, maybe it's 15 years. How smooth do you think? I would say the smoothness should be like the generation, right? Like you shouldn't be competing with your parents or your kids, but your siblings, like you and your siblings shouldn't inherit because exactly that's how inheritance works, right? Like you and your siblings should be inheriting roughly the same amount. So we should smooth it out over the course of, people in like their sibling. Now, obviously, if your little brother's 10 years below you and he inherits a little more, that's fine. But we don't want people of the same generation to get drastically different amounts. But that's easy to do. I mean, this isn't
So
like rocket science,
so
right?
so if the wealth of the person, right, the wealthy man that died is tied to things like a business, maybe Twitter, maybe Tesla, maybe something like that, how do you intend to take that wealth, right? Because if you effectively want to take money
Yeah.
and distribute, that's liquidate the company, the value of his wealth in those equity in those companies. then you're effectively going to be destroying those companies, right? So how do you intend to liquidate the wealth of wealthy people that are tied to assets like businesses, like
Well,
land,
yeah, I mean, I'm not going to pretend there's no
options?
estate. Well, I mean, this already happens. So, like estate planning, there's a whole field of doing this, and they already do this, right? So, there's people whose job it is to make the smallest loss possible to pay that tax, right? The government demands tax, right? The nice thing is, the government demands money. So, when Elon Musk dies, the government wants their 45%. Right. So he tries to leave everything to his kids. They're going to take his 45% and they're going to sell those shares of Tesla immediately because they want cash. Right. The
Hmm.
nice thing is you could imagine if you were giving it to the next generation of American citizens.
What if the company is not publicly traded? It's a private company. There are no shares to sell.
All companies have shares.
No, not
Yeah,
all
they just
companies have shares.
all companies have shares. When you incorporate a company, you have shares, you have stock. Like it's just not public.
Yeah, okay. So the stock are not the private. They are privately held, right? They are
Yeah, you
held
can still
within the
sell
family,
shares.
or
Yeah, yeah.
they're held. But if it's not public, how does the government sell those shares? Who does the government sell those shares to?
I mean, the government can sell whatever they want. I mean, if
To
there's a
who? It's a
valuation,
private company. It's not a public. It's not publicly traded. So how do you
it's
sell
not
it?
publicly traded, but you can still no, it's not traded on the like open market, but the shares of
Yeah.
any big company are still traded. You know, the government doesn't care, right? The government wants their money, but like part of what makes this such a great idea is in this case, imagine that you turn 45 and you're told, hey, this is your share of inheritance from the previous generation, and then you learn that you can get more money if you take shares of stock. So then we can transfer you shares of stocks. Now you can become a stockholder because if you're giving it to people and they can earn more by not like liquidating a company, maybe that's what they'll do. So maybe like when Elon Musk dies, then Tesla gets held by a bunch of people. That's a good thing, right? I mean, what this is effectively doing is this sounds crazy, but it's making all of our parents. It's making a single
So
like in America, which is
what incentive would I have as a businessman to create wealth, right? Or to even buy into, maybe to buy into Tesla. Maybe the government wants to sell stocks of Tesla. So what incentive would I have to buy into that, knowing that by the time I die, whatever I have is still going to, it's still going to be sold off and distributed to people who are at a certain age. What incentive would I have to do any of that?
well, A, it's still going to your kids, right? So all the money is pooled. So the more
No,
wealthy
the whole
you
money is not going to your kids, because your kids are going to get the same as everyone else when they get to that age. Like when they get to the
okay,
age of
okay, but
45, they're
wait,
going to
wait.
get.
Imagine that you don't have like okay, like so imagine that you have your family, right? Like you, your wife, and your kids. But
Mm.
you're in sort of instead of like living that type of lifestyle, you live in more of like a tribal type family. So your brothers all have kids and you have kids, and there's say like 15 of you guys in a clan. And it's set up so that when you die, your money will not just go to your kids, but your sister's kids, your like brother's kids, all those kids in your family.
Mm.
Do you think now you'd have no motivation to be like the like wealthiest person in the clan? I think you still would
But
because you
no,
would help out all your kids. Even now,
no,
your kids
no,
are also
that's different, because I'm not sharing it with 4 million people. I'm sharing it with my. Even if my children, my progeny are 4 million, they are still my progeny. I have filial attachment to them, so I wouldn't bother. But the idea that 4 million strangers are going to partake in the wealth that I've built over the years, it's insane. I'm not going to let that happen. I mean, it's this de-incentivizes people from even wanting to create wealth.
I don't agree at all. I think you would have a long like if you think about it, when you die, you're dead. Like, what's the
Yeah,
point in
see, yeah,
general? Now you'd be celebrated. Your legacy would be so amazing. Like you would literally be
but
so popular.
that's fairy tale, because people don't care about, quote and unquote, that kind of legacy of, oh, outsiders saying, oh, you are very philanthropic. They care about what they leave for their kids. They care about what they leave for their family. That's what they care about
I
mostly.
I disagree 100% because it's just not true. Like Donald Trump, look at him. He's alive. He's alive. And I don't think he needs to leave his kids anything. He set up his kids very well. Don't
He
touch my
doesn't need to leave them, but he can leave them. He should leave them if he wants to. If he doesn't leave them anything, they're not going to be poor by any stretch. But people, that's how humans are built. That's how humans are wired. They want to leave things for their kids, for their progeny. That's why people work so hard, right? So you're not going to take away that part
You
of
can still leave stuff for
human
your kids.
nature.
You can still leave it for them, but you just give it to them before you die. It's like if you buy your kid a
And
car
then
before you
this
die,
defeats
you're
then
not
this
leaving them a
defeats
car.
then this defeats the purpose of your, because everyone's going to be doing that. Everyone's going to be leaving stuff to their kids before they die, so the government
But my
can't come
argument
and take
is
100%.
everybody's already doing that. Everyone's already doing that.
Yeah, so what changes now? Everybody's already doing it de facto, right? But
My
there's going to
argument is
be
that's
a
the main
concerted
reason
effort
why you
to
want
do.
to. The main reason why you want to be rich is
Yeah.
all the advantages that you can give your kids while you're alive. The
That's not the
advantages,
only reason.
it's
The part
95% of the
No, no, no. The main reason is so you can leave them things. You can leave a legacy that, okay, your family, your progeny, they're going to carry on and on and on. That's It's not just about giving them access. If it's there's some rich people that their kids don't even work, their kids don't, they have no tradable skills, but they're leaving them those wealth so that they can.
I
Uh,
I disagree. I mean, I'm not. I can't say that I'm in this class yet. Maybe one day, but I know. I mean, this is obviously anecdotal, but I've met people. I know a guy who the grandfather was extremely rich, and this is a story. So yeah, this isn't data, but I met a man. He was extremely rich. I don't want to say how I knew them, but basically, it's someone my age, and then his mom's father was super wealthy, like incredibly wealthy, and then the man that the mom got married to, he didn't work. He was incredibly lazy. He just drank. He drank all the time. He'd do drugs with his son. He would be with like tons of other women. Like he was just a deadbeat like stepdad. But he's married to the mom, and he would say horrible things. He would say things like, "I can't wait till your old man croaks." He would always be saying that. And I met them, and then I met the grandfather. He was such a sad man because from his point of view, he knew that they were like waiting for him to die, right? And when you talk
yeah.
to these kind of people, they wish that they could not leave their kids this money because they know that the fact that they are going to is disabling to their kids. But at the same time, it's really, unless they're really cruel, it's
No,
really
no.
hard to not
I
leave
think,
your
I
kids
think,
the
I
money.
think, I think the scenario you're painting is a fringe scenario, or it's not the majority of cases or scenarios. Of course, there are going to be people who wish they don't give anything to their kids because they feel their kids are not worthy of it. Their kids are not deserving. Their kids are just waiting for them to die. But there are plenty. The vast majority of people are actually looking forward to the day. That's why the kid who is a young man is, his the father brings him into the business and lets him rise so fast through the ranks of the business so that he can take over when he's there. Are people who were there in the company 20 years, 50 years, right? And this kid who was born right before their very eyes becomes the CEO when the father dies. That's what the parents want their kids to be able to inherit. Most parents want their kids to be able to inherit their businesses. So
Yeah, but you can
this
still, but
totally
that's the
just
thing,
throws
like
that up.
you can still do all that stuff. It's all, and you can grow the business and you can still do everything. It's just like the money in your dad's bank account, which he didn't really need, that he still had when he died. That's not going to go to you. That's all.
Yeah, but no, okay, so all his money is tied in the business, all his money is tied in assets, all his money is tied in stocks, right? The government is still going to take from your proposal, still going to take 45% of that.
No. The government's not going to
Percent,
do
sorry,
not.
it's only going to take 100% of that. Effectively, government is taking the whole company from your proposal.
No, because if you have been like rising through the ranks of the business, then the son obviously now owns a big percentage of the business, and of course, when the father dies, he doesn't own close to 100% of like the company. He owns
Okay,
a fraction.
so a fraction of what's a fraction. What if, okay, like you said, that already happens. The father decides before he dies, he gives 100% of the business to the children, right? So every businessman, every big businessman knows this, and they do this before they die. How are you going to mitigate
Yeah, so
against
that
something like that?
so that gets to my point of why I say, like, in theory it would be 100%, but because you don't want to make transfers illegal, like that just seems too draconian. So you have to like tax them, right? So instead of saying, okay, you can't give your kids money, you can say, okay, yeah, you can, like right now, you can give your kids up to like 32 or $64,000 tax free. If you give them more than that, then it adds up until you've given 10 million. Then after that, it's 45%. I would have something like this where, yeah, you can give them 32 or 64 or whatever, like just say like $50,000 tax free. You give them more than 50,000, the government's going to tax 85% of that, some high percentage to motivate you not to do that.
So I think this is a part of the place where I would have to agree with the statement that if you taxing people at exorbitant rates is bad for business, right? I really don't usually buy that argument, but in this case, I genuinely think that it's going to be bad for business because
How?
people are not going to bother. The government is going to take the big chunk of it anyway,
No, I
because
no.
now you are putting a cap on, okay, you're putting a cap on what I can give to my kids, right, while I'm alive, right, that is
That
non-taxable.
already exists. That already exists, though. That cap's already there.
Yeah, the cap's already there, but it's not to this extent of 100%. You're going to be taxing whatever is left at a
But in
100%.
1973, when it was like 75 or like 80% versus now when it's 40%, we don't see a difference in business. So we have empirical data that says no, that's not true.
But I think there's a reason why it's down from 75% to 45% right now, because it wasn't very, very popular.
No, because of George Bush in like 2005, he called it the death tax because like really wealthy people wanted to give more money to their kids. But that was it. But look, all taxes are bad. I'm not like pro tax. All taxes are bad. That's a fact because taxes disincentivize work. The least bad tax is the tax after you die. It's
So,
not hard to argue. Like
so
what's
I,
gonna imagine that like you go to work and I take half your money. Well, now you're not gonna want now you're not gonna want to work as much, right? Like the worst is like a transaction tax, like sales tax. It makes it very hard for you to have a business if you have to charge more and you don't get to keep the money. A payroll tax. Now, if you want me to work for you, you have to pay me 10% more, but I don't get it, right? Like there's so many taxes and they're all bad. And this is the least bad tax by far. It's the most
so
inefficient allocation of wealth is to heirs. It's
yeah,
so inefficient.
but all this is in theory, right? You're not going to take away human feelings. People are going to think that they're being robbed, unfairly treated, much more than the other forms of taxation. So they're going to resist it with everything that they've got.
I don't think so. I don't. I think if they do that, like if people are rational, for like almost everybody, except for 1% of people, 1.5% of people, under this plan, they get more money. So if you are self-interested, unless you're in the 1.5%, this is a winner for you. Like, so if people are rational, self-interested, and there's a democracy, then it's hard to imagine why this isn't already the policy. Because it's very different than me saying, let's say like I don't make that much money, but I don't support tax rates on people who make a lot of money. Why is that? Well, that's because it could be that I'm just really stupid, but it's also one thing I like about the US, right? It could be because I plan to make a lot of money, right? Like I plan to make $1 million a year soon. Not yet, but I
Mhm.
plan to. And when I do, I don't want to give 80% of that to the government. And also that appeals to a sense of that's not fair. So it appeals to a sense of unfairness, and it and I may have aspirations to become that rich. But now I ask you, like, let's say that like your grandfather has $100,000 and you're going to inherit $100,000 next year, or under this plan, you're going to inherit $500,000. You think your grandpa is going to get rich in next year? That's not going to happen. So like, you're not going to bet on the people that are really old suddenly like coming into wealth. So if you're a rational person who wants to make money, who wants more, which most people do, and you're in a democracy where they're at the, it's not that the majority always rules, but at 98%, it should probably rule. It's in your interest to support this completely in your interest. And then also, it doesn't really at least for me, maybe you don't have to agree with this part, but I think for most of us, they actually appeals to a sense of fairness. When you think about like someone who gets a bunch of money because his dad was rich and someone who's really poor because his dad was poor, that actually doesn't seem fair. So it
But
does
people
seem
don't
fair
care.
that
People don't care about fairness.
no,
It's
but
one
no,
of
but
the
but I'm saying some people who are like very socialist will like look at America and say like, why aren't the taxes on the rich much like they should be much higher? And the
they can
argument is
say that doesn't mean Americans want that.
no, but the argument is why don't Americans want that? Obviously, okay, you can say some Americans are rich, they make a lot of money. They don't okay, fine, they don't want that. That's rational. But why don't people who don't make that much money, why don't they want that? And my answer
Because
is
it's not up to them whether they want it or not. It's the people who have the resources and the power that are going to fight it,
yes,
that would
but
not want it
we
to happen.
okay, yes, but we have this illusion that we have somewhat of a democracy. And I think that's actually true. I think on some level we do. I think if there's some policy that's hated by like 98% of people, I think that policy will be changed. I think that the people with power have control more than the average person. And there could be, policies like, funding wars where 70% of the people are against it and it still gets funded. But I think, I mean, as you saw with gay marriage, right? When it was like 50% of people, it didn't happen. Then the number just went up, right? So as things get to, where 70% of the country feels a certain way, those things do actually change. So our people with power have disproportionate power, but I don't think we live in like a dictatorship where like 2% of people are in favor of one plan and it happens. I think the majority rule is somewhat true. So
Okay,
again,
so
but wait, so why wouldn't a poor person favor massive income tax and massive redistribution? My argument is, and
of course
people that
they
are
would. They would. Those who don't have money would favor such a
I
policy,
don't
but they
agree.
don't have the power.
I don't, and I think it's condescending when people who are supposedly left that they look down on those people and they say things like this because they're stupid. It's because the Republicans trick them to vote against their interests because they're racist. Like they make all these reasons because they're like they can't understand why would a poor person not want to take the person
Because
who
that
makes
poor
all the money.
person, the poor person thinks that he's in transit, that he's going to be rich tomorrow, so
Exactly.
he doesn't want you to do to him what he
That's
feels
one
you're
reason.
doing to the
Yes,
rich
that's
person.
one reason. That's so the first reason is he thinks he's going to be rich tomorrow. And he may be rich, right? So it's possible. The second reason is even if he's not rich, people do not just vote against in their economic interest. They vote somewhat in a sense of morality and fairness. So it could be that I probably will never become rich. You work really hard, or you're LeBron James, you're more talented than me. I don't think I deserve as much as you. Like if you work hard than me, you do deserve more than me. So I
But
don't
if
want it. I don't
okay,
want a
so
handout. Right? I don't want a handout. Like I want to try to get rich. If I can't get rich, it's okay. I
so
don't I
so,
don't
so
deserve it.
Tade, what stops people from just cruising through life till they get to 45 when they get that inheritance tax that the government just gives to everyone at age 45? What stops people from doing that?
The fact that most people right now who inherit $500,000 don't do that, right? Like we have evidence, right? So we can actually see the people who have a massive inheritance coming are the ones who cruise through life. So we would be doing a favor to all those people's parents because we would have these kids now who do just cruise through life would now need to actually get a job and do something, which is good for the economy. It's good for their parents. It's good for everybody. The point
So
is 500,000 in now again, like I said, that's very aspirational. It might be 200,000 because people are going to make complaints. People are going to say things like, you can't force me to sell the family house. There's probably going to be some exceptions. But the point is, how much do we need to give people? We need to give them a lot. That's one thing
okay,
I believe. You
I
can't give
think we
them
should
2,000. You can't give them 2,000. That's not enough money. But you don't. If it's not 500,000, if every person gets $200,000 at age 45, that would be massively helpful, right?
so 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 today, maybe let me just try and recap the major points that you're making, because more people are coming to the stream now, so they know what we're talking about. So we're talking about reparations, right? So Tade is having this idea that instead of reparations for a specific group of people, let's have reparations for everyone. And the way this is going to work is that government is going to tax estate tax at 100%. So when a person dies, government is taxing what the person has at 100% and redistributing that wealth to Americans Now, the criteria for you to get that wealth, let's say everybody who is 45 years old at this point in time gets money from that estate tax, right? So next year,
Not everybody. If you just came to this country, you don't get it.
yeah,
So
but Americans, like
yeah.
American citizens, right, will get once they are 45 for that year.
No.
Those who are 45
I
for that
think it
year.
would make sense to. I think America, with all like the problems we have about race and like ethnicity, I think it's good to create. So I think if you came to America at age 30 and you got your like citizenship like last year, you turned 45. I don't think that you should be entitled to it. I
So
think
no,
you
no,
need
so
some type of
so
like
no,
American
basically,
effort,
no,
right? That people can spend here.
those are just those are ancillary points, those are
Yeah,
secondary
sure.
points. But the major idea is that, let's say everyone in America is an American citizen, they've been there for more than 30 years and all that, right?
Okay, fair
So
enough.
it means that once they get to 45, like all 45-year-olds this year get money from the estate tax that the government takes from dead people, taxed at 100%. They don't get, that's a one-off payment, right? So by next year, those who clock 45 get that money. Yeah, next year, those who clock 45 get that money. Now, so for me, I think it's an interesting idea in the sense that uh, that way many Americans will actually get to benefit, right?
Hmm.
Um, then but I just see a huge logistical issue. I see, apart from the logistical issue in terms of people fighting it, people looking for ways to combat it, that the incentivizing of businesses or people trying to make wealth that they know the government is going to take 100% away from them. um, Apart from those things, I think there is something to it, right? There's something to it, but I just don't know how it can work in a place like America or any place for that matter, right? I really don't know how it can work.
I mean, I think it's beautiful because I think it's so American, right? It's so, if the concept, people who like love this country, the concept is that America is supposed to be a country that has limited government and doesn't have high taxes. We're not supposed to be a socialist country like in Sweden. So in Sweden, it's very hard to get rich because the income tax is incredibly high. But I don't know if you've ever had that chocolate, like the Toblerone chocolate. That's from, I think that's from Sweden or maybe Norway. It's from like one of those countries. But those families who own those companies are incredibly rich, are incredibly rich, because in Scandinavia, which is thought of as this like amazing paradise, dynastic wealth is easier to keep. It's easier to stay rich in your family. It's harder to become rich because the income tax is so high. If you're a lower middle class person in Sweden, the tax rates are incredibly high, and it makes it harder for you to get to the like middle class or or like even higher. Yes, it's good. I think it's a good thing that it's hard to be really poor because it's like very generous. But it's not, in America, you're supposed to have a good shot to become rich, right? So I think that a lower income tax, to tell people that if you work hard, you can get more. We're not going to tax it like they do in those countries. But in this country, we compete. So like everyone is kind of equal. Like we're all in the same family. It doesn't matter. We don't have like a dynasty. And America is the country for like the newcomers. And so like dynastic wealth to me is not American. That's un-American, right? So like in this country, it makes sense that we tax you when you die, but while you work, we tax you less, because that's why people want to come to America, right? They want to come to America so they can get paid for their labor, right? So and again, I think
Yeah,
the
and
American
amass wealth that they
ethnicity,
can leave for their kids.
I don't think that's true. I think that like my dad, when he came, like, I think it's, you want to see your kids having more opportunities than you did. You want to send them to better schools. You want to give them more. And then after
That's
that,
part.
yeah,
That's part of it.
that's so much more. Because if you have any
I
parenting
don't think
skills,
so.
you think that you're at all competent and you give your kids this amazing life, they shouldn't be poor. Like they shouldn't be
Yeah,
poor.
but that's in theory. In theory, yes, you have a point. You're right. But in practice, that's, even if they know that they've given their kids all the opportunities to be able to succeed, they still want to leave the business, still want to leave their wealth to their kids. And okay, so you and I were talking about rich people nowadays, like Bill Gates saying they're going to donate their wealth to charity. We all know that the reason they are doing that is so just to escape the estate tax, which is currently at 45%, right?
No, no,
right? So,
I don't think it's just that. I think it's that
but
they
I
have
think
this idea.
a large percentage of it is driven by the fact that they somehow want to give their wealth to their kids, but not directly because they know it's going to be taxed at almost 50%.
Yes.
So they're at 45%. They are dodging this massively. What do you think is going to happen at
But
100%? They're going
wait.
to maximize ways to
Okay,
um,
the data says that's not true. But my point is, they're already doing this. They'll still do it. But I'm not claiming that we'll all get 500,000 if they stop doing that. I'm saying in the current status, given that they're already doing this, there's still $500,000 inherited on average. And of course, that's after the 45% are taken. So of course that's going to keep happening. Whatever's happening is still happening under this model. I'm not assuming that, although I actually believe things will change because look at history. Like so do you know why America has an income tax, and do you know why we like mostly pay it?
no, I don't know.
So the story is that during World War II, the income tax went up, and there was a lot of like social pressure to like pay your taxes, because if you don't pay your taxes, the Nazis will win, right? So there's this idea that like you got to support the cause. So everybody sort of got behind this, and that's sort of how they were able to get this tax and get people to comply. Because obviously, if people don't pay their taxes, it's very hard to force them to. In fact, well, the estate tax is the easiest one because you only die once, but all the IRS agents, it does work on somewhat of an honor system, right? Because they can't like audit all people. So it works that people have to sort of believe in it, right? And in my opinion, if you look at like a country like Greece or a country that doesn't pay their taxes, a lot of it comes from not believing in the government. But in this case, it's also what the government does. So if your estate tax, if this tax is going to be redistributed among all Americans, and if we socially think of someone who cheats that tax is someone who steals from the group to help their own kids, that's selfish, right? So that's social like pressure not to do that. Like that makes you a bad person. Whereas if you don't pay your taxes, like if I just said we should increase the estate tax and pay for more wars, obviously it's like, well, okay, yeah, I'm not going to pay that, right? But if the concept culturally becomes like this is what we do as Americans, like we don't give people an advantage based on their parents. Like here we compete. Now, obviously, there's a big advantage while you're alive, but beyond that, right? Like from the grave, we don't change things. If that culturally is accepted, then people will pay this and they won't dodge it because it's what we believe in. So it's not just an economic argument. I'm saying that, yeah, I think culturally believing in this would be a good thing. It would cure a lot of the problems because unlike, imagine you want to fund a tax to pay for like race reparations. Like that's going to be way more unpopular. So you can argue that people don't like the idea of giving to kids that aren't theirs. Maybe that's true. People really don't like idea of taking money, paying people based on race for a crime that happened long ago, probably before, in most cases, before their ancestors even got to like this country. People really are going to dodge that tax. So anything you argue about this, you have to accept that argument is tenfold for any other type of like, right? Because you have to raise money to pay. So I think this one would have the least problems. It's not that it has no problems, but it would have the least problems. That I think it's hard to see why it wouldn't.
So eh, you know how Americans have this visceral reaction to anything they think is free, right? Free money. Now, not only are you proposing to take money from people who are there, the 100% of that, you're proposing on giving it to everyone. That's going to be a nightmare.
But it's not free money because look, man, it's okay. Don't think of it as I'm taking it from the person who's dead. Think of it as I'm taking it from the person who's alive, who would have got it. So that
Yeah, but that even makes it
is free
worse.
money. It's already free money. Whoever gets it, it's free money. It's money that you didn't
Yeah,
work for.
exactly. And Americans don't like free money. They don't like you taking someone's money and giving it to other people.
But it's all of our money, right? It's the
Yeah,
money of the
it
dead
does.
people.
It
It's
doesn't.
literally the only free money that exists. Like when you work, that's your money, and we tax that here. We tax that a lot. We tax that more than 50%. In this
You are
country,
seeing, but
you
you are
add
seeing it.
up.
You are seeing it as free money, right? In fact, the idea that it's free money itself just makes it much more distasteful to Americans who don't want,
No, but
a
it is
freelance.
free. No, but I'm saying it. Okay, look, if you work and I give you $100 right now in America, if you live where I live, you pay like city tax, state tax, income tax, payroll tax, you pay all these tax. You pay like probably 55% of your paycheck is taken. That's my money, but they take it. If tomorrow you're walking around, God forbid, you get hit by a car, you die, you have $100 in your pocket. That is the only free money. That is the only free money
No,
that
it's not
exists.
free money. It belongs to my kid.
No, it belongs to you and you're dead. So it belongs to no one alive. You might want it to be sent to your
No,
kids,
no,
but
it belongs to my kid.
no, why?
Because it's my kid. What belongs
Okay.
to me belongs
Does
to my
that money,
kids.
okay, so in my opinion, and I think most people would agree, that money, let's say, let me agree to, I'm going to agree and say it somewhat belongs to your kid. I'll say that, right? Because nothing belongs entirely to anybody because we are in a society. But I would say that money belongs to your kid less than if your kid just worked a job, worked 8 hours doing hard work and got $100 from his job. He has $100 in his pocket, and then you die that same night and you have $100 in your pocket. The $100 he got from his labor belongs to him more than the $100 in your pocket. That's what now maybe neither one belongs to him at all because we should all pay some small percentage to for the roads and to help out the poor, so that we all have to share. But I would say that money belongs less to your kid than the money he just earned by
But
his work.
but but
That's
all
the
this is so heavily hypothetical and theoretical
but
that it
philosophically,
doesn't
all
translate.
money, all tax is stealing, right? All tax is stealing. And I'm arguing that I'm not saying that means we shouldn't have any taxes. I'm saying that's true, right? So all tax is bad, but it could also be good. There's a trade-off. So I'm saying, which stealing should we do? I think that we should steal from the money that has the least ownership claim to it. And the weakest ownership claim is the money in the pocket of the man that just died.
Yeah, but
The
that's what
longest
you
ownership
think.
claim is the
That's
money in
what
the
you
pocket of the
think.
man that just worked. That's what I believe.
That's what you think. But the man who is waiting to inherit his father's properties doesn't see it that way. And
Of
frankly, I
course, he
don't think
doesn't
most
see it that
Americans.
way, but I'm also saying that he's 1% and I'm in the 99%.
Yeah,
And in
but most
democracy,
Americans
I
don't.
win.
I don't think most Americans will see it that way either, because the idea is most Americans think that they are rich people in transit, right? So they don't want you to do to they don't want you to do to a rich person what they think you might do to them in the future.
But if you're a rich person in transit, then believing in dynastic wealth doesn't really make any sense. If you believe that you're in a country where you will soon get rich on your own accord,
Yeah,
then why do you also think it's very important that this country protects dynastic wealth? If making a dynasty is how you
that's
get
the.
rich, then you can also think that I'm
Oh
in a
no,
country that
that's one way. Dynastic wealth is one way of how you get rich, not the
it's
only
not
way
a
of
way
how
that
you
any of
get
us will
rich.
get rich. Like if that's what's going to work out for you. You already know like that's one way, and it's a way that's off limits to most people, right? It's
Yeah,
not
but
like
there
you're
are
going to
other
be
ways
lucky.
as well. There are other ways as well. Now, the only thing everything has in common is that no matter how you get your wealth, from your proposal, the government is going to take 100% of it when you die, which people don't want.
Yeah, I'm saying that obviously it will probably be watered down, but I'm saying the idea is that the wealth and the earnings of the previous generation should be passed down to the next generation equally. And that's the sort of philosophical idea. And the more, the better, in my opinion. Now, people are probably going to have some problems with that. And some of it I understand. Like, I guess I think that, like, I wouldn't have a problem with, so when like if someone dies and I inherit their coat or like, something that's sentimental to me, but isn't that valuable. Yeah. Okay, fine. It can be some small exceptions. Some people are probably going to have a different opinion than me and have like more exceptions. So one big thing with the estate tax that they always like, there's always like a big thing about this thing about farms, right? So people that don't like the estate tax will make this argument that if some guy dies, the 45% will cause the family or force them to sell the farm. And so they've tried to carve out exceptions for this, but it's kind of BS because you have to have a farm worth more than $10 million, right? So a lot of this is just romantic appeal because honestly, the reason why they make up this appeal is actually sort of a counterpoint to your argument. It's because most Americans don't like the idea of inheritance. Because if you try to tell an American, you say, hey, look, this guy died. His parents were gonna like his kids were gonna get like 30 million, but then they didn't. Most Americans are like, yeah, so that's like fuck them. I don't care. Like they don't care. But if you tell Americans that there's this family and they've had this farm and they just work with their hands, they had this farm in their family for like so many generations and they're not that rich, but the farm is technically worth a lot because of the land valuation. Because of that, they died, and now all these people have to sell the farm and move away. Then they have sympathy. So people aren't actually sympathetic to inheritance unless you attach a story to it, which is mostly preposterous and edge case. But the point is, like, people are somewhat sympathetic to the idea of inheritance of sentimental things, like a family farm or land or like something that's really tied to the person. But people are not very, very sympathetic to the idea of inheriting money, right? Which I think is sort of an un-American idea. In this country, you should work for your money, right? Like that should be how it works. You work for your money, and what you give to your kids is you teach them how to work for their money. Yeah, of course, you give them tons of advantages, but the main thing that you impart on them is that skill, right? And I think it's also would be like better for the whole economy. I think like we'd all be far more. We'd all have far more if we tax our like incomes less and we tax the previous generation more. I think it's disabling. I think there's a million reasons. And let's tie it back for a second to the reparations idea. So you are pro reparations based on race. Why?
I'm not pro reparations based on race. I'm just saying that I haven't seen any compelling argument against it, right?
Well, this is a compelling
Uh,
argument against it, that this would have the same
no,
effect.
this is not an argument against reparations based on race. This is an entirely different proposal. This is reparations. What you're saying is reparations for everyone, irrespective of race,
But
right?
there's no one left out. So people who are poor because their ancestors were slaves will also get money. So it makes
Yeah,
everybody
yeah.
equal.
So like I told you, it's an interesting idea that everybody gets to get a certain amount at a certain point in their life that could change their life. I think it's a good thing, frankly. But the where you're getting the money from and how you're going to be implementing it, I think that it will be an implementation nightmare. And just that
I didn't
the
know. It's
realities
the
the
easiest of all
realities
places.
no, it's not.
Where's easier?
I don't
What do you
know,
want to do?
but I
You
don't
want to
think
raise
it's I
income
don't
tax?
think it's any easier.
What do you want to do? Do you want to raise the income tax? Like you can't create money. I mean, you can cause inflation, which maybe people won't. I mean, you might be right that if you just print money, people won't know, but it'll be a lot worse for them. Like
No,
you can't
I'm not.
create money.
No, I'm not. I'm not making a case for anything. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Okay, you asked about do I support reparations? I don't know. I'm agnostic on that point. If it happens,
But
fine.
okay,
If it
okay,
doesn't,
fair. But
my point.
let's say that I do support reparations for race, right? Like I'm gonna try to make the argument for it, which I think there is a good argument for it, and it's very simple, right? It's just not fair, right? It's not fair that somebody should suffer based on who their parents were. But my argument is that
Yeah,
the
but it's basically the same thing. Why should someone suffer? Because why should someone suffer just because their parents are dead, right? Why should because you're saying the reparations for say African Americans means other Americans who had nothing to do with slavery had to pay would be paying
no, no,
because of
no.
tax money.
I'm ignoring that. That is obviously a huge obstacle, but I'm just imagining that that's not an issue, which most people tend to do, which I think is wrong. But I'm just going to say, imagine we can create the money out of thin air. So we're not. This is an argument about punishing the people who don't get money. Imagine you can somehow give money to all the African American people without taking any money from anybody or causing inflation. Just imagine that. And like, why is that an appealing idea? Like, why do I think that's appealing, even if it's not possible? I think it's appealing because I find the idea compelling that you shouldn't suffer based on who your parents are. However, let's imagine that you're an African American and I'm an American whose ancestors held slaves. Maybe they held your ancestors, right? I think it makes sense. It seems really reasonable that if I inherit all this money that my parents made from, well, not my parents, but like my long ago, ancestors made because they enslaved yours. And now I'm set to inherit, I don't know, $1 million, and you're not set to inherit any money at all. Does seem like that's unfair that I should get that money and you shouldn't. However, I don't think that the guilt is transferred. So I don't think that I'm bad because those are my
No, but
ancestors.
this is not a matter of good or
No,
bad.
no,
This is a
but
matter
wait,
of this is a
but wait.
matter of
Let me finish this. Let me finish. It's not. I don't think I'm bad and you're good. I think it's unfair. And we can look back in like history. We can see how that seemed unfair, and that the effect of that injustice is still here today. And that's why I'm set to inherit all this money. You're not set to inherit any money at all because your ancestors are different than mine. Now, I don't think that makes me worse than you. I don't think that makes you better than me. I think it
of
makes you
course not.
unlucky. I think it makes you unlucky. You were unlucky to be born into a world where you were born into the ancestors of the slaves. I was so lucky to be born into the ancestors of
I
people
totally
who
I,
took the
I
slaves.
totally agree with that point. That's not the
It's
point
just
of
luck. But
my
now switch it up. Now say neither one of us were born to ancestors of slaves or slave holders, but your grandfather just won the lottery and got $1 million, and mine has nothing. So you're lucky. I'm unlucky. Why should I suffer? I should not
yeah,
suffer because
you
I'm
should suffer.
unlucky.
Well, you're unlucky. That's not my fault. That's not my business.
It's the
So
same issue with if your ancestors were slaves and mine were not. You're unlucky. Sorry. Like I didn't
yeah,
choose to be born
yeah,
here.
yeah. But the only difference being that slavery was supported by the government, was a government sanctioned institution, right? So the government is liable, wherever the government is going to get the money from, if it ever comes to that, then that's the business of the government. It's not anybody's business to say, how it is the government going to come up with the money.
So okay, so if the government is taken over tomorrow, we have a new
Okay, so
government
Tadi,
with all the same people,
let's
then you
let's
believe that there's no case for reparations to be made.
Tadi, let's say, for example, let's modify your proposal and say you said part of the bottlenecks with giving African Americans reparations is because you can't just give 40 million people money. Let's say
But
we give,
you can, but you have to get it from somewhere.
yeah, you said you get it somewhere, it will cost inflation, it will cost so much. And so let's say instead of giving every African American 40 million at a stretch or something, how about every African American who turns 45 at a particular point in time
Yeah.
gets the reparations?
Yeah, I mean, I would be more in favor of this. Obviously, this would be a way better idea than the ideas I've seen floated. But I truly believe that the ideas that are floated are literally. I think this is how it works. If you look at the people who support these programs, like Nancy Pelosi and Elizabeth Warren, these people are worth hundreds of. Nancy Pelosi is worth a couple $100 million. Elizabeth Warren is only worth like 40 million. But I believe that the reason why they would never say this is because the race reparations idea is a canard. It's they basically look at the world like this. They don't want to share their money. They're incredibly greedy. They're corrupt. They trade stocks, even though they are in Congress, which I find insane, right? And they look at it like, I want to keep all my money. I never want to share it. And then they see that there's this like big argument that Black people want to get money, and like, well, that's good because if I support that, I can split the poor. And now these 13% of people think they're gonna get money. They're never gonna get it because obviously the majority won't go for that. But if if I had to share my money, I'd rather share it with them because they're a smaller percentage. So for them, supporting race reparations is a no-brainer because it's if it happened, I'd have to share less. Also, it's less people, so it'll never happen because the majority will never go for it, right? So like that's why you don't see plans like this. But yes, that would be a big improvement. It would make way more sense than this idea that you can give all Black people, all 40 million people. I mean, maybe the plans are all adults or something, which is maybe I don't know, 25 million people. The idea that you can cut them all a check doesn't make any sense. So yeah, giving them money as they hit a milestone in age would make way more sense. But I don't believe people that talk about race reparations are serious, which is why I don't think and I don't think it's going to ever get traction because it's a minority of people, and it's not a group of people that are all poor and have like suffered equally. But yeah,
Wow.
I would agree that that's an improvement. That would improve. That's a better. But that I mean, you stole that from me. But sure, you just made reparations better. Made a better argument.
Yeah. So, Tadi, quite an interesting
Yeah.
conversation with you tonight. I think, I think the points are interesting, right? the idea that everybody gets to, irrespective of race, irrespective of color, irrespective of ethnicity, irrespective of socioeconomic background, everybody gets sort of a basic amount at a particular point in time. Seems like an interesting idea. I still have to think about it, but like I
But it's
said,
not independent. It's
bottlenecks.
not independent of our ethnicity. I do want to say that, right? It's dependent on our ethnicity as Americans.
Yeah, of course, when I mean independent
Yeah.
of ethnicity, I'm speaking about Americans. I'm talking about American citizens.
But
We're
that's the
having the
problem, that we
conversation.
don't think of ourselves as an ethnicity, and we should, right? And a program
But
like
that's
this
that's
would change us
that's
culturally, which is also good.
that's interesting for you to say that, because you should doesn't mean what is different from what should be, right? You of course, Americans should see themselves as the American ethnicity, but that's not the reality. That's not what is, right? So we can't say because that's the way it should be, then we should now base our theories
No,
or
but
our
I mean, it
base
reflects
our
our
actions based on.
policy, right? That's my point. That Pelosi and Elizabeth Warren, they're choosing policies to not allow that to happen. Because if Americans are united, then they're going to agitate for programs that help the majority of people, right? That redistribute not just money but power, and they don't want that to happen. So for them, they like the idea of multiple ethnicities, so then they can fight amongst each other, right? So it's not just a policy that's good for the reason that it helps out people who are poor and it makes people have a better chance in life. It's also a policy that will change culture. So I think that policy is a reflection of culture, and it can also change culture. And I think this would, you know, the big message would be like being American entitles you to something that Americans as a group have earned, right? It gives us a group identity, which we don't have.
Hmm. Okay, today,
Yeah.
I said good
All right.
conversation, but unfortunately, we have to draw this to a close. It's late.
It was a good
Uh,
matchup. I
yeah,
appreciate
it
it.
was, it was, it was, it was. Hopefully, we can have another conversation too. There are lots of comments on this
Is there a way to see
on
these
this
comments?
stream. Yeah, there's a. I can see them. I can see them. I don't know why you can't see them. You
Oh,
should
I see
be.
them now. Oh my God, there's
Yeah,
so many. Oh
yeah.
wow.
There are many comments. So from the beginning of the conversation, at the earliest part of the conversation, the comments were no, 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 no. But this later part, okay, you were beginning to connect more with the audience and see.
Stanley, Stanley's hilarious. Oh, wow, it's so
Don't
funny.
mind Stanley. Don't mind Stanley. Anyway, today we
Yeah.
would
All right, brother.
still
Talk to you soon,
definitely
man.
talk more and more and more. Thanks
Yeah.
for the conversation. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone. Like, share, subscribe to the channel, and I will catch you guys in another live stream. It's bye for now.
Okay. Peace.